health. All right. It's a pleasure as always, and we welcome all our viewers on GBN Television 711, our friends on our Facebook page and YouTube channel, and of course our listeners on K105 FM. It's a pleasure, and it's also a good time to welcome Dr. Nixon. Doc, good evening. How are you doing?
Hi, good evening. Good evening to Grenada and our friends in the diaspora, regardless of what platform you're joining us on. And of course, good evening to my favorite seniors, those who listen to us every week on their radio line down in their bed. Good evening to everyone. I hope you're keeping properly hydrated. It's been quite hot. Not quite as hot as in New York. And but you need to make sure you take your fluids. All right? Keep a bottle of water by your bedside, or a cup of water, a pan cup, I don't care. Just keep water all over the place. You can always get a sip. It's really very hot. And of course, if you know older people who live alone and don't have anyone to look out for them, please make sure that they have some water nearby. It is hot. It was 107, I think, today in New York. And I saw a friend recently who mentioned that the lights were dim. It means that everybody's running the AC at maximum because the humidity is in the 80s for them and it's really high. I don't know. The world look like it's turning upside down because we're the ones closer to the equator, but it's hot. Okay, so let's remember, and of course our children. Let's remember no sodas, water, coconut water. Okay, the children yes complain that they're thirsty, but we're gonna give them what is healthy drink.
Yes, okay? Indeed. So, Doc, this evening, first Thursday, which is June 26th. It is International Day Against Drug Abuse and Illicit Trafficking. Of course, this is no new message. Drug abuse and illicit trafficking has been, is, and if it's not addressed, will continue to be a major problem facing us, affecting us in many ways, including our health. And to that, we're going to look at that. Before we start, though, the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, he gave a short message, which I just want to share, very short. And he says, the illicit drug trade continues to exact a devastating toll, claiming lives, ravaging public health services, and fueling violence and organized crime. Drug trafficking is tearing through communities with substances that are more potent, more dangerous, and more deadly than ever. Meanwhile, criminal networks prey on the most vulnerable, particularly women and youth, as they rake in hundreds of billions annually through the illicit drug trade. This year, we shine the light on prevention as the most essential strategy for halting the flow of drugs that fuels organized crime worldwide. We must reduce demand through investing in education, treatment, harm reduction measures and care, target the machinery of production by eliminating illicit laboratories and offering farmers viable alternatives, and sever trafficking networks by strengthening global roots and choking the financial flows of criminal networks while always ensuring respect for human rights. And he ends by saying, let us recommit to ending drug abuse and trafficking, uniting to dismantle criminal networks and breaking the cycle of suffering and destruction once and for all. Quite a message from the Secretary General as it relates to that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed, Doc.
You know, if you've lived in a drug-infested environment and have seen the effects of drugs, especially in bigger and more advanced countries where there is substance, you have big structures available to intervene in other ways. I guess we could understand the human destruction that occurs as a result of substance use. In Grenada, for example, what do we use mostly? Alcohol, cannabis or ganja, and cocaine. Alcohol is by far our most commonly used substance. There is some level of illicit drug trade going through. And I want people to start thinking, because they're probably going to ask questions on that. The whole so-called decriminalization. I want to use that word because I think it's very important that we understand the difference between decriminalization and legalization of cannabis. Okay? I listened to the Prime Minister last night, and I think it was very timely to address the issue, although it wasn't the platform on which that alone was being addressed, but he did give make some very clear words in relation to cannabis or marijuana in particular. Because I would hate to think that we will extend our public health challenge further because people think that cannabis is legal. Legalize it. Don't criticize it. You know, remember that?
Peter Tosh
of blessed memory. But here, Secretary General goes on to talk about education, right? Maybe it's no mistake why the drug abuse desk, the drug council, right? National Drug Council, that desk is in the Ministry of Education, because I think that's where we have to go first.
Yes,
right?
Indeed.
Educating our children on the positives of not using substances. It is very easy, especially when we have very addictive substances like alcohol, right? To start using and start feeling how it make you feel nice. That's why people take it, make them feel good about themselves. All right. It is very easy to do preventative education and preventative interventions as to why people should not get started. Because the honest truth, we don't even have a rehab center for alcohol, and mostly for cannabis and like cocaine. Well, cocaine you don't really need rehab, but for cannabis you go to up to Mongi, or alcohol in particular, right? But there are so many other levels that you have to intervene, at which you have to intervene to ensure that substance abuse is not part of our people's life. As it is in Grenada, we have enough challenge already, enough health challenges with chronic disease, childhood obesity, okay? The potential for rising infectious disease, COVID showing up its ugly face, plus we have the threat of war on the horizon. We have to have ways to minimize whatever other public health threat exists. And we know that we do have problems. We know that our males in particular have problems, more problems than the women. Cocaine, cannabis, right, and alcohol. And women are mostly abusers of alcohol. And what statistics have shown is that women use more alcohol, a lot more stronger alcohol than men, believe it or not. And they have been using more and more. And smoking, which is another challenge to us, right, there's been an increase in those kind of habits. So I think we want to figure out how we're gonna, what are the chances, or what are the challenges, and what can each of us in our own community and our own space do, right, to prevent. We tend to, because when we don't understand things, we like to criticize them and put them down. I think the whole issue of education must be done on a national level. Mm-hmm. People must understand. I have a little beef with the cannabis thing. Not that I don't think that cannabis should be decriminalized, but I want our population to be fairly told what it is that decriminalization means. And the Prime Minister said it last night. We were listening to him carefully, because he said it immediately as he mentioned decriminalization. Acquiring cannabis or ganja for medicinal purposes in particular. So where it has positive effect on the well-being of the population. So this is not a free-up. Everybody smoke 10 weeds. He also said that they're gonna change the law so that the people who have been criminalized by the cannabis use, whether you had a pound or 10 pounds or 2 ounces, I don't know what the limit is, that they will expunge these crimes. So you get a clean plate, as far as your criminal record goes. And then they also not going to consider a man having a spliff for his own recreation, but you can plant a small plantation. You can plant a square of thing, right? And the laws when they put forward are going to explain that, because I think our population deserves to be told what the law means, and above all, they need to be told why is it that the health issues related to cannabis abuse, most of them saying abuse, right, remain the same. So if you legalize it, that's fine. The truth is that most of cannabis's medications are taken orally. Right? What are we afraid of? We're afraid that our children become addicted or have the need, right? They have the habit of using these substances. And we could talk about them one by one as to how they affect us, right? Because in the case of cannabis, for example, we see, and we talked about it last week. Was last week when we were talking about adolescents, and the week before?
Yeah, it was the week before. Yeah.
How, when we were talking about mental health.
Yeah, the week before. Mm-hmm.
Right. When we spoke about how people may have a predisposition. You're likely to have a mental illness if it runs in your family, especially schizophrenia, which is the most feared of all mental illnesses, right? But that when children start using cannabis under the age of 14, that the potential for having schizophrenia, for having to suffer from that disease, the disease becomes manifested, right? It's way increased if you're using cannabis, smoking cannabis under the age of 18. And I have seen in my life people who have severe psychosis, where they say they've gone really out of it. Mentally, they don't have any reason. They become very hyped. They just don't know where they are. And we see it, right? They become very ill and they're taken to hospital. A day or two, they become normal, docile, wonderful, interactive, healthy people, right? So we have to find a way to educate our population as to what decriminalization of marijuana means, right? But it's going to be decriminalized with a direct purpose. In the same way, like you can't give a kid alcohol, you shouldn't give a kid a spliff, because you'll be procuring, and that should also be against the law. So when that law, I know it's not completed, when that law is completed, probably take all this into consideration, because we have to protect the vulnerable, we have to protect those who don't understand what's going on, and we have to educate. So I'm hoping that the people who are the ones that are going to do this law also have a plan, an education plan, right? So it's not everybody smoke, I can carry a spliff in school, no I cannot. Do not come into my office smoking your spliff. If you understand what I'm saying, right? So that we can protect our population from the illnesses that can be brought about by abuse of cannabis. There are laws that actually protect. For example, the alcohol law tells you cannot procure, you cannot give access to a child under 18. Okay? So you can't buy it for them, you can't give them. But a lot of us will go to jail in Grenada because all of us give our children sorrel with rum, Christmas cake with rum, right? Get them a little beer when Christmas come, right? So we have to be very aware, especially if you're in a situation where you're prone to becoming to becoming addicted, all right, to the substances. We kind of sensitize our children a little too early, way too early for that. right? So they start consuming alcohol very early just from being home, and it becomes, oh, so what? My mother gave me cake with Christmas cake with enough rum or Christmas pudding, right? My grandmother make my special cake and put my rum in it or my wine, whatever it is, it's alcohol. So we have to really revisit that and explain to our population, because that is it's kind of specific to us. Maybe Caribbean people, but in case of Grenada, those behaviors are specific to us. We have to look at our parties where children are. I know this is graduation time. We still should not be having alcohol in parties where our children participate. Those kind of stuff we need to look at. And of course, there are also the other drugs besides cannabis, alcohol, and what did I say, cocaine, which are a little more expensive and harder to access, but it is available. You have to think about all the other little boutique drugs that we get, like Molly and stuff. I don't know all the names, but Molly has been very prevalent that students use when they want to stay up to sleep, to not sleep. And Molly is a legitimate drug. It's just that it's used in an illegitimate way, right? So education is very important, because a lot of parents don't understand how their children can be predisposed or be exposed to the challenge with drugs in a society, right? So I just saying all of this because I think we need to strip it down a little more. I'm listening. The director, Antonio Gutierrez, who's actually Cuban, states that the illicit drug trade continues to exact a devastating toll. We have seen what happens in the streets in certain cities in the U.S. Guess what? It can happen here too, you know.
Well, I mean, it happens here on a much lesser scale.
Public health services and fueling violence and organized crime. So, claiming lives. Alcohol is claiming lives. And unfortunately, alcohol is a legitimate substance. Alcohol is part of the base of our economy. And like I said before, of the rums that we produce in the Caribbean, we consume 40% of it. Why? Okay? It is claimed that the Caribbean produces the best quality of alcohol, but we ourselves drink 40% of it. That's like drinking a profit. Okay? 40% of the alcohol, right? And we've seen it putting us at risk for chronic diseases. So we've seen people develop hypertension and diabetes because of long-standing use of alcohol, severe nutrition problems, cancers. And we talked about that 2 weeks ago, right? When you're talking about men's health.
Yep.
Cancers, many kind of cancers. Just like smoking, alcohol has become one of the risk factors for a lot of diseases. We've seen a lot of our men who have had amputations, and it's not only that they don't treat the diabetes, but they've been consuming a lot of alcohol. Alcohol is pure sugar. Alcohol made from cane. Just that they don't make sure they don't take it and make rum and whatever whiskey, whatever they do, right? They brew and they ferment substances that produces a sugary substance, right? And that can create problems. So we've seen how that can affect our population and cause lives. A lot of people are dying younger because they have alcohol or alcohol in particular related diseases. So we are going to have to educate. When we educate, we're going to have to talk about that. When we talk about our childhood diseases, our chronic diseases in childhood, we're going to have to talk about that, okay? That kids are probably having access. They drink beer, they go out and they find stuff. Have you seen a video? There's a video with young kids in Trinidad, and they had the bottles of whiskey and sharing around. And you know, you feel sorry because you feel very sad. It's really saddening because these are kids who think, you know, like I say, they like to feel like they're big, right? They're doing it and they're adolescents. They're young kids in high school, Form 1, 2, 3, right? And they have their little gangs and they have their expensive alcohol consuming because it makes them feel very powerful and they don't understand, okay? They simply don't understand the detriment that alcohol does. What is that? So alcohol goes, it's absorbed in the liver and it goes straight in and it does goes straight to your brain. Different people have different thresholds or a level at which they are affected. The first thing you become is you lose your, you become quite confused, your inability to make decisions, right? To take proper decisions. Apart from the fact that you get dizzy and can't see, and your whole, all your reflexes are slowed down, okay? And sometimes this inhibition, the lack of inhibition that you have, they become belligerent, or they quarrelsome, and they're not cooperative, right? And we've seen murders, and that's what Antonio Gutierrez speaks about, the crimes that come, and that is not organized crime, but in relation to the use, I've known of several people who have died because they've been involved in an argument with some belligerent person and somebody gets stabbed and killed. And it's really their friend. When they get sober, they wonder, how did I kill my friend? But that inability that cognitive change, that inability to make decisions, to be rational, to think, in any rational form, can cause us to make decisions that are very, very detrimental, not only to ourselves, but to the lives of other people. All right? And of course, the alcohol-related accidents. If we were to breathalyze everybody who up on the road, you'd be surprised. And as silly season comes, it has already started. You see them on Sunday morning playing jab. You see people on the street who are drinking. There's no two ways about it. Or they come off the boats from those cruise and they're drunk. They walk across the carnage like a cockroach out of that just got halfway washed down the sink and managed to come back up, or who has had his own fear of thing and quite confused, and they get into their cars and they drive in the night on our bad roads and put us at risk for dying on the road. So those are the things that have to come, and obviously we're going to have to put our information in different places in life. In the workplace, for example, when you're talking about health, you must address the issue of alcohol and drug consumption. Because if you don't, these are the people who work in people. The guys on the block, you need to tell them about it, and they might be upset, but guess what? They need to understand what the health consequences are, because this is what it is about. How is your health affected by using drugs substances that can alter your mind? Substances that can alter your mind. All right? So we talk about claiming lives, we talk about accidents, we talk about fighting, people falling down and hit the head and dying. Those things happen. And of course, we talk about chronic diseases where people consuming substances, and especially alcohol, which is our primary drug, right? Having long-term problems, loss of limbs, becoming economically non-viable, because you can't really produce if you're sick, if your diabetes sugar is always out of control, you keep losing a little more of your body. What happens? The public health services are supposed to now fix all of this, are supposed to take care of you. If every Monday morning you have to take off another toe, right? Or we can't control your sugar, so you get back into hospital because you're almost in coma because of your sugar, right? Or whatever other disease, your heart is not functioning well, and that's one of the challenges, right? If our women are drinking alcohol while they're pregnant and causing their children to have fetal alcohol syndrome, it's going to cost us in a neonatal unit, right? And those are challenges those are problems that we can prevent if we'll inform people, and if people are willing to cooperate and say, no, I can't afford to do this. I don't want my child to be born with mental, incapacity for learning. I don't want my child to have fetal alcohol syndrome and be a different funny child in front of his other peers. I want my child to be equally healthy, right? So we have to penetrate the society at all levels, and remember to remind people that substances are a challenge, to everyone. And like I said, because we don't look like we're on Skid Row, or we in downtown Baltimore, or in Appalachia, or other places where substances are produced, and you're not standing on the sidewalk where defying gravity, it doesn't mean that we don't have a problem. And even if our problem might seem little, that's our problem that we are going to have to address. You don't see very many people out there who use hard substances. They're just standing on the street. But there are men, we see the drunk men walking on the road. We see them lying on the street, much to the embarrassment of their children and their family and to themselves. We see them becoming lying on the street, not being able to work. Their families suffer. They go home and there's abuse in families, abuse of spouses, abuse of their children. They beat their children because they themselves cannot understand what has happened here because their mind is so altered by the substance. Okay? We are going to have to intervene.
Right.
We're going to talk about how we can solve the problem after. And of course, we talk about violence.
Right. But
violence related especially to the trade of drugs.
Right, but before we go to that, I just wanted to stay a little bit on the effects, and we spoke about the judgment and all of that. The interfering with judgment and making good decisions. The issue of addiction. There are people who think that especially men, of course. Well, they can do their thing, smoke their weed, do what they have to do, but they could control it. How does one get to the point of addiction?
So I think it's the way your brain functions. People like to feel nice. These substances alter how your brain works. And the more you take, the more you need, the more you take, the more you need. And when you become so dependent on these drugs, eventually you have to take it. You have to take more and more of the substance in order for you to maintain that level of joy, or not just the joy, the gratification, but also the level of where you have enough substance in your body so that you don't have withdrawal. You don't feel the negative things of the tremors and the hallucinations, and although that comes with alcohol, but the physical discomfort that you may experience as a result of not having, it's by your body becoming more and more habituated to whatever amount it takes. You need a little more, you have to keep on it, you have to keep taking it, right? As there's discomfort that's related to withdrawal. And that is hard, because when you get to that point, you will find any way to deal with your addiction, because you need to have it to remove the discomfort that you're experiencing as a result of not having it in your system.
Right. What about the correlation between that? Let's say the use of alcohol, marijuana, cocaine, and the issue of depression.
So whereas those substances can make you have depression, some people also use substances to remove the anxiety and the symptoms that come with depression. Okay, that's what we know. That all men turn to alcohol a lot when they're experiencing depression. So they will alcohol in particular, right? Because it kind of numbs the sensation of isolation and whatever it is, the thing that you don't have control over, and the sadness and stuff, right? Might be a temporary euphoria, but the bottom line is that using substances does help to numb the negative experiences, the emotional experiences that people are having. Whereas they claim that when women have challenges, they go talk to their girlfriend first, or they go talk to pastor or something. Men turn to the bottle. Unfortunately, that's a reality in our society. Mm-hmm. How do we do this? I don't know. I can tell you how we do it, because it's kind of very touchy. Okay, subject to speak about. A lot of people don't turn up for substance support, despite the fact that their family is ravaged by the use of alcohol in particular, right? Despite the fact that we do have some, probably in an adequate quantity, but there is a place where you can get substance, especially alcohol rehab. And it's a good thing about alcohol rehab. 75% of the people who go into rehab and who stay remain in recovery. So there are these 75 people out of 100 people who are not going to go back and consume alcohol once they go into rehab. So therefore, we're going to have to find facilities, right? Since alcohol is such a very widespread problem, we're going to have to develop facilities for all people to be able to access, okay? To access for substance recovery. Because alcoholics can remain in recovery for the rest of their lives once they do the alcoholics. They use it. 12-step has worked for alcoholism, as it does for other substances. You know, people have gone into the 12-step program because it speaks to recognizing what my challenges are and how I use my spirituality, or I develop my spirituality, my productivity, in order that I recognize I'm not going back there, and how people, places, and things are going to affect my challenges as a substance user. All right?
Right.
Do I still go on the playing field if the guys are smoking weed and I don't want to smoke, or want to drink rum every Saturday night when we're playing dominoes and drafts? Do I go? No. Because you will be. You just need to have one drink and you're gone straight back down the sluice. So that's places. Who are the people I hang out with? Those are the guys. Am I going to change my friends? Right? And what are the things that motivate me to drink? Depression, don't have a job, whatever it is, those events and things that make you feel that you need to go back and use a substance creates enough anxiety, because anxiety is principally one of the symptoms that occurs with substance users.
Okay, let me just share something quickly here. And it's from my favorite site, WebMD, very credible, and it speaks to the signs of addiction. And it says you may have one or more of these warning signs. 1, an urge to use the drug every day or many times a day. 2, taking more drugs than you want to and for longer than you thought you would. Always having the drug with you and buying it even if you can't afford it. Using drugs even if they cause you trouble at work or make you lash out at family and friends. Spending more time alone. Not taking care of yourself or caring how you look. Stealing, lying, or doing dangerous things like driving while high or having unsafe sex. Spending most of your time getting, using, or recovering from the effects of drug, and feeling sick when you try to quit. You have these symptoms, and then you need to start going to rehab. Or you shouldn't wait until you start.
Can we go through one by one? Because I think we could expand them a little, can't we?
Yeah, right. So the first one, an urge to use the drug every day or many times a day.
Yes, because it gives you that gratification, that feeling of high that you like. That you feel in a very safe space. You feel very empowered. You feel, I like how I feel. I'm good, right? And sometimes because we're so gratified, we forget that we're being gratified by things that are not going to, we're being made to feel nice by things that we're going to need a little more every time, because you become habituated, right? Your body gets accustomed, and you need more and more and more and more of the substance.
Right.
Right?
You know, someone shared a story with me once. They said one of the things with weed in particular, the first time you use it and you get that high, it is such that people tend to go back to get that experience, but they never really
and for
do.
Substances that are more addictive, like heroin, which we don't use a lot of, right? And all of heroin's cousins, that we use out there. That is a problem. Those substances that give you that first rush, right? Cocaine, you can kind of get off if you once you stay away, you don't need to be hospitalized. Of course, you're going to need counseling and understanding, because you don't get as much withdrawal from cocaine as you do from heroin, okay? That is a challenge, that people get that first rush that initial rush. So, for example, we know in the case of cocaine, if you do, what's the other one, crack?
Yeah.
Because crack is cocaine with other substances, right? That give you that extreme high. And glory, hallelujah, you want it again because you feel so good when you're up there. All right, so you keep going back. So that first rush that you get of, this is really euphoric. This really feels nice. This really makes me happy. Oh, I love this. I love this. You keep searching. You keep searching
for that first high. And you never get it. You never get it.
Because what happens when you get that first high? You have all these hormones, these chemicals in your brains that are rushed, right? That comes out and give you that feeling of happiness and high. But you kind of spend the cells. You kind of kill off those areas where these hormones are created. You will never ever have so many to use again. So you never achieve that high again. So that is why that first thing is advised not to have that first rush in educating of people, because you will develop some level of addiction as a result. You need to go back. I need this. I have to find this. Where
you're looking for it. Yes, okay? You're looking for it. Yeah, and never to be found.
What's the next one?
Taking more drugs than you want to and for longer than you thought you would.
And that's kind of related to what we just said.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people think they can. There are lots of people who believe that they can take a drug, they can use it, and I can control. No, sir, I would never end up like John. You'll never see me on the street. Well, not this week. Okay? I would never like that. I wouldn't do that. Nobody would know. There are very, very few people who are able to take small amounts of a substance, right? That enough to be still functioning, that can control what they consume. Okay? That is not necessarily the majority of people. And we see them on the street. We've seen the images in the US, especially. We see some of the people who we know here in Grenada, who people tell you, oh, this woman was such a fledgling professional. She could have done, she's very talented in this area and that area. We see men, right, who that's on the street. Everybody know that this was a school teacher, or this was X and this was Y. And you see them out there, whether it's alcohol or other substances. They're just out there, right? Because they didn't intend. Nobody intends to become a substance addict. No one intends. Everybody thinks, I can try this when I go to a party, and that's it. But that high you go seeking again, especially if you like to feel high, right? You go seeking and you seek and you seek, and there comes a point when you can't hide it anymore. It becomes very obvious to your family, to your friends, to your co-workers, to your children, to whoever it is. Right?
Yeah.
What's the third one?
The third one, always having the drug with you and buying it even if you can't afford it.
Well, that's not buying. That's called trust, okay?
Well, I also think, okay, so in a case...
You can buy something with that money. What you do, you sell your mother jewelry, you got your teeth it, and those are the other behaviors that come with it, those antisocial behaviors.
But I also think in the context of having more important things to do with your money. For example, like, probably getting your child to school or getting food for your home or money for bus, for work and all of that. But instead of using it for that, you use it for drugs. So you don't have money to afford the drugs, but you use other monies that are already spoken for to get it.
Remember the level of social dysfunction that occurs with people who have that kind of need. Mm-hmm. Eventually, they don't go to work.
Yeah.
Because they're seeking the drugs, and they will find the drug, whether they beg, borrow, or thief. They will find it. Women will prostitute themselves. Men prostitute themselves as well to get money to buy the drugs. Or you might have a dealer who probably wants homosexual favors, who will, indulge, mm-hmm. and you use this man, right, and give him the drugs, right? So we know that people will seek it out because they have that need. There's the anxiety that it creates. I have to get this. So what I do, like I tell you, I sell out my mother, she jewelry, and when I finish, I sell out all the little, little pretty things in the house. I sell my children new shoes. I sell you go there and you hustle. And when you hustle, you take you thief my computer, right? My $5,000 computer and sell it for $2 and for $200. Guess what? Because you need a fix now, and it's hot, right? And it's hot. And when that funny money gets in your hand, you have to spend it out. You go for the thing, and then when you need your next fix, right? So people know that they're going to need a fix. They're going to need how much times they need to shoot up whatever they're using to feel well, whether they need 6 drinks of alcohol or they need 6 lines of cocaine, whatever it is. They know that they have to sustain that habit. With alcohol, it's probably a little easier because for everybody drinking, they give you a draw, and the guys in the shop will share. Okay, they're very kind to each other that way. Right? Them is bad friend, but them is friend, right? But you know that you need your fix, and the first thing you figure is, how am I going to take care of that need by any means necessary? And so the criminality can become an issue where you break into people's house, you kill people, you take away a very important part of people's lives, things that are fundamental links in how their house functions, and you take it and you sell it, okay? You break into people's cars. I remember living in Montego Bay, and you see them walking up and down the street, looking into your car to see what's there. And they break your window and thief it. You have something that looks like it's of value, they break your window and thief it and gone with it. I've seen them do it, okay? And I'm not calling them like that's a behavior that people who have need to satisfy their substance habits will do, right? Would they do it in a good mind? No, they wouldn't. Right? Would they do it in good conscience? No, it will not be done in good conscience. But here people have a physical and especially a mental need to be satisfied, to not have to do so much anxiety, and especially if you're going to have physical symptoms from withdrawal, that they know they have to have their thing. In the case of the guys with the weed, which is not as addictive, yeah, they still need it. So they will get their 3 spliff in the morning and have it in their pocket. Right? Put it in there. And I remember going to court with one very prestigious lawyer. And he said to me, boy, I was so embarrassed this morning. I said, what happened? He said, there's nothing we need, okay? And he said, he went into the pharmacy to buy his cigarettes. Right? And his spliff fell out of his pocket. When the money dropped, and he bent on to pick up, and the spliff fell out of his pocket. And I was flabbergasted. But then to him, a spliff was just a spliff, was just a thing. Was like he might as well say, my chewing gum drop out of my pocket. That's because that's one of the things. Some people don't see it as any big thing. Okay? When we talk about having to have it or not thinking you can use much, you would use it. You would use so much of it. Because I can tell you that friend of mine went on to use cocaine. Right. Destroyed his career, lost his family, okay? Because there was that need to feel high. There was that need. So, that was number 3.
Right. So even using drugs, even when they cause you trouble at work or make you lash out at family and friends.
Right. So that is when the social effects of substances start manifesting themselves, right? They're jittery, they can't function, they're not as productive as they're accustomed being. Think about it, you have an engineering firm, and your top engineer comes in and he's not performing, and he's not designing your bridges as you want or your structures as you want. He can't do a work plan and all of that. It can be detrimental to the services that you're offering. Right? He probably will be so belligerent with his colleagues. But think about, he goes home to his wife, and she's like, John, where the money? What you do with the money? We have to pay the mortgage. We have to do this. The children need school books, blah, blah, blah. It's August, and we need to be buying the kids' books. School fees have to be paid on, whatever it is. Or it's January. We have to pay CXCs. What's your story? Right? And it creates a work, because he can't, or even she can't expose to the family that I have been using my money for this habit, right? And this is a very hard place. People know they're wrong, but they just don't have no control over it when they get into that space of their lives. Okay,
right.
They know they're wrong.
Here's a very interesting one: spending more time alone, not wanting to be around people.
Right, because you don't have to isolate yourself from the people who are not like you. So you get your things, and you don't want people to see when you change. You may be also depressed, so you stay by yourself. You don't want your children to see you lining up your line of cocaine. You don't want them to see that. You want them to see that you're pushing you're injecting yourself with the other one. God, I keep forgetting. You don't want your children. You don't want to smoke around your family. Okay. You don't want to drink around your family because somebody might pull you up for it, draw you up for it, and say, "Hey, what's going on here?" Right? So you spend time by yourself because you actually isolate yourself socially because you're no longer like your friends that you work with. You're not like the guys on the football field anymore. You're not your husband, your wife's regular husband, or vice versa, because you have this big secret that you like to keep for yourself.
Indeed.
You know?
And then not taking care of yourself or caring how you look.
Yeah, because that is no longer priority. Okay? Because you only focus on your priority is to make sure that your brain feels well, feel high, and you don't care. Okay? And remember, you have what we call cognitive, the thought and decision making part of your body, of your life. That is affected often. You're no longer socially engaged. So it don't really matter how you look. You don't have to bathe. You really don't care, right? Because that is no longer a priority. Those aren't things that fall in the hierarchy of priorities. Your only priority is to make sure that you feel
that you get your
high.
Yeah. And after that, then you start stealing. You start lying,
talk about that.
Doing dangerous things, driving while high, and having unsafe sex.
So that's one of the big challenges, and I've seen this so much at Carnival that bothers me. I remember a few carnivals ago, that must have been like 7 years ago. That was before COVID, certainly. And I remember these young adolescent girls so drunk, so inebriated that they had no awareness of where they were. Granted, some of them were in the medical post that we had on the road, right? But these young women, adolescents, I talk about 16-year-olds and 15-year-olds who were so drunk, right? Because alcohol is free. I mean, everybody just get it. If you play in a band, you pay down, they give you a vial of alcohol. But if you're not accustomed drinking, you can drink a vial of alcohol, a quart of alcohol. And not everybody responds to alcohol the same way. I hear people talk, boy, I can hold my liquor and I can drink one whole bottle of white rum, which I would not call any name, right? Or the overproof rum, and they don't get drunk. But it doesn't mean that other things are not going on in their bodies. But I remember these young women vomiting on themselves, urinating on themselves, because there's just so much normal physiological dysfunction, right? And you have to take them to the hospital and put a drip on them and give them medication to combat the effect of the alcohol on their system. But in a place where there's possibility, conditions are fine, they will be abused sexually. What do you get from that? You get HIV, because nobody thinking about condoms and all those things, because everybody might be drunk anyway, right? You get HIV, you get pregnant, you don't even know who the baby's father is, right? You lose your opportunities, and your whole life goes downhill from that, right? Plus, we see it on the street where women actually prostitute themselves, right? Yep. Because they need to be able to get money, and that's very sad. And often those relations end up in pregnancies. Well, Mr. Trump is not going to have any of you doing abortions, so you have to be careful, right? And so when we look at it, the health system has to be very integrative, has to be very tolerant, has to be very supportive, right? Has to be so that people can have a very comprehensive way of intervening. Unfortunately, we don't have that, and that is what is my bother. That we have problems and we don't have yet. I know there are efforts to reestablish a rehab center, a treatment and rehabilitation center in Mirabeau area, right across from the hospital where the nurses' hostel was, right? And the truth is, rehab, I might go into rehab for 2 weeks and manage, but if people need to be in rehab for 6 months, a year, right? In order to really understand what the challenges are, especially with alcohol, which takes a long time. How do you reintegrate into society? What if you didn't have a career at all? You're just a guy who worked you just wash bus, okay? Or what if you are an engineer at a big firm that you lose, right, because of the substance use, right? The level of rehabilitation is going to differ. The needs of the individual is going to differ. Where do families come in this? How do families support you or not? They might be tired of you, right? The tolerance is just really, they don't have time for you anymore. They've done everything. They've tried to send you away. But rehab services are necessary. However, rehab has to be something that you have to be ready to accept.
Indeed.
Right? We certainly need to have more trained people to deal with substance counseling, relapse prevention, all of those things. Okay, being able to have occupational therapy. So you'd have a rehab center. You probably need to have a tennis court or a basketball court, or you understand, a little place for football, and somewhere we plant land, and a sewing room where the women learn to develop crafts, or access to the kitchen where they can make whatever. Things that people can understand their value, because that's one of the things you're going to have to reinstate into people. What are their values, right? And then we have to think about the people who use substances or not, but who are also traffickers of the substance. It's a big problem.
Major.
Right? Who might actually be big-time criminals. We've seen a lot of the guys die last year. Was last year? The year before? The year before. When we had a lot of young men who died, one after the other, because one killed the other, they have gangs and all the rest of it. Those are unacceptable, unsavory practices that do not line up with normal social practices in any society. Least of all a society like ours that doesn't have a lot of resources, okay? We've seen people get killed. You know what happens when you live in a community where somebody gets killed like that and you don't know who killed them? Think about the amount of anxiety and fear that it brings into the community.
Yes,
Think of, you may know and can't talk because of fear for your life. Okay? Think of children who may see their parents killed as a result of that kind of activity. Think of children who just lose their parents, and then you hear all the gossip in school and kids bully you and they chat, and it's very difficult, right? Having to deal with people who are involved in criminal activities related to substances, especially more difficult if they are also users of the substances that they distribute.
Traffic, yeah.
Right? Because distribution, we really don't make much. You grow weed, but you distribute things like cocaine and other narcotics. Right?
And then
so go ahead.
No.
Go ahead.
Finish, and I would go to the final two.
So therefore, when we plan in services, we have to take into consideration all of the challenges, and they have to be designed to suit the environment in which we live. Okay. So
Definitely.
you remember Carlton Halls being up on the road, right? Why would you put your rehab center next to where there's a bar?
Was there a bar there, or the bar?
No, the supermarket right there, because it could be buy rum and get it, you could. I'm just saying, right? You need to be in a space where they're not, where the temptation is far from you. And I'm not saying we have to pet and powder, but we have to create environments that are as sterile as possible, so people can understand that, hey, this is the sterility I need, okay, in order to be able to reinstate my life, right? We need to train a lot of people who can give appropriate counsel to people who are substance users, right? And we need to be able to identify. Talk about isolation. You know your teenager is smoking weed when he get quiet and always in a room lock up. When you look at his friends, who do you hang with? Show me your company, right? it's almost not easy to avoid using it if you're in a crowd where it's always because somebody's going to taunt you until you break.
Peer pressure, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that peer pressure is very difficult, right? And so we're going to have to train peers, young people who can talk to their peers in the language that they all speak. Right? You're going to have to create diversion, right? What skills do you think you can make? What would you like to do? They spoke about, and speaking about the entertainment industry and sports, that was brought up last night, about being alternative activity for young people, for people in general, but for our young people. We know that we encourage a lot of sports because once people start drinking, once people start exercising, it's kind of hard to smoke, right? And even to use other substances that slow you down, like cannabis, which really slows you mentally, slow, until we have a psychotic break, all right? So we're going to have to figure out how else, what are the alternative practices that our young people can indulge in so they don't choose these negative practices, all right? But it's a big thing.
But you see, Doc, here's my issue. And as you, it's probably not just big, but it's a challenging thing, because providing alternatives is one thing, but if we are not getting rid of the problem, they always remain, and so we allow our people with a choice. You know, so
we speak about demand reduction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Demand reduction has to do with a certain conscious information, knowledge that our entire population has to manage. First of all, this is not a responsibility of the Ministry of Health or the Ministry of National Security or the people at Mount Gay who offer medical. This is an issue. It's a community issue, a broader based societal issue. So everybody has to recognize that this is what it is. We can't turn blind eyes. We have to practice, when it comes to national security, we have to practice zero tolerance to people who peddle drugs. But we also need to be able to counsel our people who make the demands for the substances, right? That this is not the best for you. Whatever is necessary to do, we have to do, right? We have to curb, we have to chop off the neck of traffickers. And I don't mean kill them, cut the neck of their business out. It has to disappear. We have to have strong laws, right, against people who traffic substances. And they say, well, the person wanted it. Yes, the person wanted it, but it's bad for the person, and it's bad for society, and it's bad for economy, and it's bad for families. So we have to make sure that we can remove, not only decrease the demand, but also make sure that the supply is not available, regardless of the small amount of people that may need it.
So, Doc, isn't this sort of contradictory? Because if this is a problem and we are looking to provide alternatives, and we're also looking to address the problem so that our young people are not sidetracked, then why are we moving to decriminalize and make some quantities of it easily accessible?
And that is why I said in the beginning, I think that we need to have a national education program on the issue of cannabis. What decriminalization means, one, right? What decriminalization means, and being able, people want to use cannabis, what responsibilities you have, right, in making sure that you are well. People must be informed. So they must make informed decisions when they're going to. They're not just smoking weed, but they know that this is one of the things that can happen. They make decisions for themselves. So I don't think it's as contradictory, because I think also sometimes when economic benefits are great, we tend to forget that that's economic benefits. What are the social benefits?
That's the thing. Economic benefits, but there's a cost. Economic benefits, yes, but at what cost? The thing is, if we are going down that road, all right, if we are going down that road, we must also remember that research has also shown that the use of what we might call milder drugs, like marijuana and so, is usually a gateway to the harder stuff.
It's right. They call the gateway drugs.
Yeah.
The other thing. That is why education is important. That is why you must tell your population what this substance, what is decriminalization means. Why we allow X, because people are gonna still have weed, okay? Why smoking weed is bad for your children. Why smoking weed is bad for you as an adult, so that people make informed decisions.
But you see, that's the thing, Doc. While we are educating them and explaining to them why the use is bad for them, we are making it easier by allowing them to smoke a spliff or two.
No, people smoke and drink now. We haven't been telling them much about it.
But that's the point. Right? They do it now.
One of the things that decriminalization will do, right? The whole decriminalization and the legalization of small quantities of personal use will do is take away the persons who can have criminal activity as a result. So in other words, yes, the marijuana we grow are for medicinal purposes. But John, Peter, Tom, Mary, Angela, everybody have their access, their own private access. So you don't need to be competing with me, and you don't need to be competing to sell to John. You sell to the people who using it legitimately to make medication.
Well, I mean, this is a conversation that will go on because and you're right. Maybe the education needs to be out there because personally, I have my own opinions. Yes, one might argue decriminalizing might cause people to have their own personal amount that they use for whatever reason as compared to the traffickers. But understanding and seeing the economic benefits, what about the temptation?
I've lost you.
No, I was saying, so people who are allowed the small quantities through decriminalization or legalization, understanding the economic benefits, how do we deal or how do we curb the temptation to move in that direction?
To have that what? You're breaking up, I'm sorry.
No, how to curb the temptation then, that of moving in the direction to gain economic benefits.
So, the economic benefits, in other words, if I can plant my tree, my tree in the back of my house, and you have yours, I don't need to be buying from you.
No, but there are people, there would always be people who want it.
Yeah, but then the price of ganja on the streets will go down, certainly. Because everybody have a 2-tree.
Well,
and then so the whole trading of ganja is no longer attractive. And then, like I said, if there's a place where you can grow your cannabis with permission and sell, you don't need to be competing with John to give get something to him because I can get you less than 0.35 of an ounce. That can make you 2 spliff, and that will keep you for the day. You don't need to have that because I can get it.
Well,
you can't sell it because that is one of the things that the law will dissuade.
I think it's debatable, but I guess it's something we'd have to wait and see. I personally
remember that we're not the first people doing this. Okay, we're probably way down on the bottom of the line. Okay, but I think my dream as a public health person is that we do it the correct way so the population is informed. So don't see that, man, I could smoke as much weed. No, you can't. You can smoke weed if you want to smoke weed. That's your business. But you don't give it to my 12-year-old, and you don't give it to my 10-year-old, and you make sure that they don't have it, and you don't sell it to anybody on the street. And above all, that you don't lace it with other substances. I saw somebody got mentally ill the other day. No, people in their 50s and in their 60s don't really get psychotic illnesses, okay, unless they have I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. Unless they have other underlying medical problems, like diabetes and hypertension and getting a stroke and thyroid problems and other inflammatory diseases that can call you to have mental manifestations. And this guy was fine. Starts having psychosis, becomes very paranoid and stuff. But he buys a tiny little pack of cannabis from the guys that's selling, right? And he gets ill. One of the things is that the cannabis that they sell on the street that is genetically modified has so much more of the cannabinoids in them, okay? So much more THC that you can knock your brain faster, right? And because it gives you that high, you would go back and buy it. We understand that, right? But people put stuff, the Jamaicans call it seasoned split, okay? Where they put other substances into the thing. They put cocaine, you name it, in their crack, anything, so you come back and buy them because there's this competitive market. And those are some of the things we want to eradicate. If I have my own weed, I don't need to buy no weed from you. You can contaminate my weed that is in my house in my own pocket, okay? And if I want to buy a spliff, I can sit in my house and roll my spliff and smoke it there, right there. I don't have to come on the road and look for you and give you money because I can buy my own spliff. I can produce my own spliff. Okay, and I'm not coming on the road and sell what I have because I'm allowed to have X amount of trees and I want it for myself. All right. So while like I said, we have this big market, which is the decriminalization part. Legalization has its limitations. How much can you have? Who can have it? Who you can give to? Who you can't just have 6-year-olds and 7. And there are people who smoke weed. And of course, we speak about the Rastafarians who use weed as part of their whole religious, in a religious act, right? So that they shouldn't have challenges. But we must create that perfect balance, and the balance is to ensure that people don't have to go there and buy weed, and that the weed that we grow goes into a safe space for the development of medicines, and other things. Okay? And that the growth is controlled, that there are people who come and say, oh, Mr. Thing, you have quarter acre, you can only grow 100 plants on quarter acre. I'm just saying, I don't know how that is, right? And you when you come, you have your licensing number, you sell, you know how to grade it, blah blah blah. That's what you want.
Right.
I'll give you a story. I used to have this patient, right, when I worked in mental health in another country, and that boy would come in every 4 months, right? Start raving out of his mind, right? And 2 days he's as quiet as a puppy. I mean, wonderful, quiet guy, right? And there was a whole nutritional thing that could have contributed, because in fact so. Because he smokes a lot and he's not eating much. He'd probably take a sweetie when it makes his blood pressure drop, but he's not eating a whole lot, right? He smoked weed and he's high, right? But he had that propensity to mental illness. Every time he come to clinic, he bring me a pound of weed. Every single time he come to clinic, he bring me a pound of weed. And he says, doctor, I love you, but that's all I have to bring for you. And I said, boy, stop bringing weed for me. I don't need no weed. But every time he came to the clinic, he brought me a pound of weed. That's what he had. So if he can bring me a pound, you know how much more he has at home? Right? They probably distribute the weed among themselves, and we have to decrease the criminality that comes with substance trade. Okay, the criminality that comes with sex, and we've seen it. We've seen people die. We've seen families destroyed. We've seen just too many negative things happen that affect our communities in a very bad way as a result of us selling substances. Okay, and marijuana, yes, but there are other things that we sell.
You know,
So I want to read what Antonio Gutierrez says. He says we must reduce demand, because that's what you have to reduce, right? That people want it. Investing in education, we talked about that ad nauseum. Treatment, because you must be able to treat people to bring them back to as normal as possible, right? Harm reduction measures and care. They need to know about what can happen, right? How do I care for myself, right? Targeted machinery of production by eliminating illicit laboratories. So if I'm going to have cannabinoids, there must be one legitimate or two legitimate centers where I sell my marijuana and they can, or maybe you send it away. But it must be almost like if you're growing cocoa, there's a proper trade way to do it. So it goes legally and in a controlled fashion, because these would be controlled substances. Remember that, right? Right? Into where it gets whatever end product it has to be, without affecting the people who might come in contact with it even casually, right? So, offering farmers viable alternatives. Do you want to do cannabis, or do you want to do cannabis to sell to the people? Or maybe, guess what? You know what's going to make a lot of money? Cassava. Not as much, but it's going to make money. We need to sever the trafficking networks, right? Break them down by strengthening global trade routes, right? So if I'm going to sell my cannabis, it must go through a place that's legitimate, right? And there must be a way that it can be deciphered. We know what I'm selling. At the same time, there must not be alternate routes that can lead us to having criminal activity, right? And we must choke the financial flows of criminal networks. We have to lock it down. We have to lock it down where the criminals are, right? And above all, we have to ensure that human rights are respected throughout. So the human right of the person who ends up being using drugs is very important, as well as the criminals. I mean, they have their rights, right? But they must also know that, hey, you have to respect the rights of the person to whom you're selling, and their rights is to remain healthy. Their rights is to be not abused because they have a weakness. Okay, and of course, at the same time, the system, the whether it is a government system, whatever legal system and health system that exists, must facilitate the well-being and the preservation of people who are who are prone or will be using substances. We must create facilities, and we must have all hands on deck. School, education system, national security, the church is very important, and hopefully the church is not going to be just criticizing and being sanctimonious, but that the church would be a support system for well-being and spiritual and physical and mental well-being of our entire population. So when they come into this, right, they can come in and criticize. No, this is a good time for them to criticize. But when the system, it is going to pass as law, we know that. It's almost ready to pass as law. When it's enforced, they must make their place known that here is what we expect. This is how we expect you to maintain human dignity. How we expect you to preserve our children and to keep them away from the substances. That's cannabis, but also from alcohol. I expect the church as one of the most structured organizations to be part of preventing our population from consuming alcohol and from using whatever substances can alter their minds. Looking into what the realities are. Are we dealing with people who have underlying mental illness? Do you know that people with schizophrenia are among the top smokers of tobacco?
Yeah.
And do you know why? They smoke tobacco because tobacco eases their anxiety, apart from the addictive part of it, but it does calm the anxiety. They tell you they feel better when they smoke. Okay? So people in mental hospitals, even though it's a hospital, are allowed to smoke for that reason, because it keeps them calm. we have to be very careful about being judgmental to people who have challenges, who have addictions, who have who make other options, who choose other pathways, right? To feel happy. We have to make sure that we can support people in whatever needs they have so that they can be well. We have to make sure that when we supporting our men who drink, that we look at what the problems are. We take into consideration the fact that their health, their general health is so important in trying to support them to choose other behaviors. Okay, we have to make sure that people who sell alcohol, which is such a legal drug, as we say, make sure that our children don't get alcohol. That is the time when they stop John from drinking because he's going to walk across the road and get licked down by a car, or he becomes belligerent and goes home and have. And they know he go and he fight a wife and all the rest of it, and the children grow up in very dysfunctional families, and then the children start to drink, and the cycle continues, and we have very dysfunctional communities. Okay, we have to be, each one of us has to be our brother's keepers in making sure that this substance problem is contained in our country. Indeed. And while people are human rights, we also have to curb people making decisions that are not good for themselves by ensuring that the laws that exist are fair but are strong, and that they're enforced. By ensuring that people who are going to take care of others are informed and trained appropriately, so they don't treat people as being guilty of a crime, but people who need empathy and support, right? And to be taught how to be responsible and to change their behaviors. We spend too much time cussing people who do wrong things, and who are, remember that you tend to see addiction run in families, and we tend to cuss off people who make those wrong choices. I remember working in an environment where I was working in a drug detox unit. And the guys will tell you, my father used to sell drugs, right? And all of us started smoking weed by the time we were 6 and 7 years old. Those are the things we have to make sure don't exist. Those are the things we have to work against to ensure that our children are protected, right? That the laws protect our children from early access to substances that can alter their minds and teach them how to allow them to make wrong decisions, right? By practicing unsavory behaviors, right? And it has to be a community-based effort. Nobody's pointing fingers because we're too judgmental, okay? We're not going to point fingers. We're just going to lift each other so that we can get rid of this scourge. We have a problem. We don't see it a lot because we think about other things. You and I talk about chronic disease all the time. We talked about diabetes and hypertension ad nauseum. We actually haven't understood, and I don't know that I understand well, right? The extent of substance use and the challenges it causes to our community. Okay, I don't have all the numbers. I read some stuff, but I don't have all the numbers. And I'm not all. When I see people who have regular illnesses. People with substances very rarely come. We would have alcohol, yes, but I see people who have hypertension and diabetes and asthma and seizures and those kind of stuff, right? Or period pain and gastro, that kind of stuff. But there is a population of people who need intensive attention to the fact that they are substance users who end up living on the streets in dignified way. We're too small to have people living on our streets. Really too small to have people living on the streets for whatever reason. But we know a lot of them stem from substance abuse.
Right. So I would just like to and we practically out of time, but I just want to end by just going over the last words from the Secretary General, asking for us to recommit to ending drug abuse and trafficking, uniting to dismantle criminal networks, and breaking the cycle of suffering and destruction once and for all.
Yeah. And that has to be everybody.
Yep.
That is not only a government admonition. That is a request for all of community, all of society, health sector, communities. I talk about communities. I live in this parish, you live in that parish. All of us have to recognize when it happens, because when it starts creeping into communities, it destroys our communities anyway. Okay? When you see our men sit down by the rum shop at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning, we have to approach those challenges, right? Not just criticize them and cuss them off like I do sometimes, but we have to find a way to empower them to be in their best persons. We have to find a way to empower them, and they do that not just Sunday, every day of the week. You can say exactly where you're going to find John or Tom, which shop, right? And sometimes they're just waiting for somebody who has a little money to come by and top up their drink. Okay?
Indeed.
And we have to make sure that our young children are not out there because they can get cannabis, just smoking because they can, not understanding how much they're destroying their futures. Right? We have to approach as a country and as a people, integrated, we have to approach the whole challenge of substance abuse and make sure we can mitigate it. And don't take this whole decriminalization of cannabis as a permission. It is not permission to smoke weed. No, it is not. It is not permission to smoke weed.
Well, we have to
understand it is not.
We have to continue that conversation, weighing heavily on the educational aspect of things to ensure that people understand, because I am very concerned about it. I am not convinced that it will solve the problem, but as you said, and we all agree, it is not something that the government is responsible for, or just the police, or just it's all of us. It's a problem. It's a problem for It's a problem for everyone, for the entire country, and we must recommit to unite in dealing with that problem. Doc, that's all the time we have tonight. I want to say thanks to all the folks who stayed with us. We've been having some issues with our Facebook page, so we didn't have it up tonight. But on YouTube, we thank those who followed. Quite a number of people who are following us on the YouTube channel. To our viewers on GBN TV, and of course, all listeners on Q105, we thank you very much. Doc, it's always a pleasure, having these discussions, and, I always look forward to doing that. So, your final 30 seconds as we say goodnight to our listeners and viewers.
Well, thank you guys for listening, but I want to bring something for me, which is for me a big problem, the whole issue of vaping, and our children are vaping strawberry flavored, whatever, and bubblegum flavored whatever, and all the stuff, right, causing damage to their lungs. Our children end up vaping tobacco, which is very addictive, and they end up smoking. Okay, I want to ask parents to be very aware of what their children do. Vape, even if you give your permission to vape, you need to read about it. Go on the internet and see the damage that vaping causes to your children's lungs. Is it related in some ways? Because your children will eventually be vaping things that are addictive, and that can cause not only physical damage but mental health damages. So that's one of the things. And I want us to take responsibility as a population. One, to educate ourselves about the whole issue of decriminalization of cannabis. Seek information, advocate for proper education for entire population about this whole decriminalization of cannabis. I want us to revisit the whole issue of our alcohol laws and how we should be preventing our children from consuming alcohol. I want us to all look at and see the cultural part of our being that allows us to facilitate our children's access to alcohol at a very early age, because you get tuned to that. You get attuned to it, okay? And that we don't necessarily have to have alcohol every time we have a get together. It is not absolutely necessary. And I'm going to ask individuals to figure out, am I having a problem with cannabis? Am I having a problem with alcohol? Am I having a problem with cocaine? Can I contain myself? What are the substances I'm using? What are the facilities? And we didn't get around to talking about that. But talk to your doctor if you feel you have a problem, because it can only just get worse if you don't, as we said tonight, when addiction comes in, it's down the gutter. Okay, slippery slope. So I'm going to ask everybody to, pinch yourself. You have a friend who's having a problem, so you can help the problem, because I'm sure they're not listening to this tonight. But it's a problem we have in our society that we have to address. We can no longer sit on it like a posy. That's not going to work. We have to address it if we're going to have a healthy and wholesome population. What's happening this week? It's raining. Please boil your water, because I noticed they've closed off the pipe a few days. I didn't have water for a lot of the weekend because there was so much rain. Okay, please make sure it's hurricane season. Please ensure that your houses are in good condition. Remember that you have to put on food for if hurricane comes, or any storm or flood or whatever it is that we're likely to have. And there was an earthquake this afternoon. Are you aware of this, Godfrey?
No, I wasn't. I didn't pick it up.
When my building moves, so I would not feel an earthquake on it. It was like 5 point something or 4.9. Yeah. But the point is if I were in my house, I'd probably feel it. But the building in which I live is on the sea, more or less. And the building always moves anyway. So an earthquake of that magnitude may not affect the building as much as if I were on the bottom floor. I'm not on the bottom floor. But it means that there are a lot of things that can be happening. We all have to prepare ourselves and be aware of the disasters that can happen. And a disaster is worse if we're not prepared.
Indeed.
So thank you and have a good weekend, everyone. There are a lot of kids who have been graduating. I wish you all the best. Graduation party is not a place to get drunk and spent and all the rest of it. It's a place to really have fun and say goodbye to your peers. I wish you guys all the best and hope you did very well in the exams.
Thank you so very much, Doc. Thank you again to all listeners and viewers. It was indeed a pleasure. You can join me tomorrow evening, 8:30 for Kaiso Talk. We'll be chatting with the guys from Morning Calypso 10s that will be opening this weekend. So be sure to join us at 8:30 for that. Until then, do have a good night. All the best.
Hey everyone, here is an invitation.